The boy hugged the girl. He tried to calm her. Then they turned around. The brown-haired man asked if his wife was fine. She looked at the house in fear. She tried to pull away from her husband's hands and shouted that Arthur was still inside. The man was scared. He gritted his teeth and ran into the wreck. He pushed things aside, trying to get in. He climbed into the house. His eyes went wide. He looked ahead, shocked. The man dropped to his knees, his lips shaking. Tears rolled from his eyes. He looked up. His wife walked over to him. She asked what was wrong. He stared ahead in shock and said it had to be a joke. The girl was also shocked. She said he didn't even have three. The baby was floating in the air. His parents hugged each other and watched. The baby slowly came down to the ground. He put his hands behind his back and smiled. He felt amazing. He made a fist and thought how great it was to have mana. He stretched out his arms and noticed the trees looked taller. The baby raised his shoulders and smiled when asked about the trees. Wreckage was all around. The baby stood in the middle of the broken house. He didn't know what was going on. He asked his parents if someone attacked the house and who dared to break the king's home. Now the baby was on the bed. A lot had changed in 1 year, along with the house being fixed. The baby read books with his mom. He learned reading and writing. His mom showed him different books. He studied mana control and how to build more mana. His dad showed him a plan. The boy wasn't happy. His body was still small for sparring. He learned the basics of body training. They didn't go on runs yet. It wasn't easy for the kid. His dad taught him to do sit-ups. He also taught push-ups. Not long ago, the boy finally chose to train for real. Now he had his own wooden sword, which he needed for training. His father gave it to him on his 3rd birthday. Then the baby looked away from the book. His dad came into the room loudly and cheerfully, saying it was time to train and that he brought his sword. The papers flew off to the side. They stood outside facing each other. His dad said it was time to remember what he had taught him. The man lifted the stick and said he must mix his mana with his breath. Just like breathing, the mana core was only another body part. The child stared, confused. He wondered if most 4-year-olds could even follow these deep ideas. The boy got ready. He looked at his dad with focus, then charged. He struck his sword at the stick. He attacked again, but his dad blocked the hits with a grin. Each time the father smiled and said he believed in him. He was sure the boy could do it. The child got annoyed. He thought his dad wouldn't let him stop until he got it right. He didn't have much time. Dinner was soon. He focused and gathered strength. He opened his eyes sharply and stared ahead. His dad looked surprised. The boy smiled, swung, and hit the stick hard. It broke. The dad was stunned. The stick spun in the air and fell to the ground. The father looked at it. He hadn't seen that coming. The child bent down and asked if he could now go to the office. His dad agreed. At the office, Arthur sat on the bed in a lotus pose. He imagined a person building energy in the heart. In this world, your power level depends on your core's color. The mana core starts black because of blood and other stuff mixing with mana. Over time, the core turns clean as those things are filtered out. The stages go like this: black core, red core, orange core, yellow core, silver core, and then white core. He imagined a white bucket. He thought that each stage had 3 levels: dark, solid, and light. A man with a white core spread his arms wide. The lighter the core, the cleaner it is and the more power it holds. Just then, the child got distracted by a loud noise. He clearly didn't like it. The boy frowned. He was being called for dinner. There was a plate of food and a glass of water on the table. Mom was eating happily. Dad was too, but the boy was upset. He stabbed the meat with his fork, thinking he wanted to be alone. How could he study with people always around? He leaned his head on his hand. The boy loudly and clearly banged his fork and knife together. The man offered to find a real teacher for him. The girl stood up and pointed her staff at her husband. She yelled that their son was only 4. A group of carrot soldiers stood in front of her and shot arrows at him. "Mother!" the man shouted, looking shocked. She glared at him and screamed more. He said he could teach the boy himself. Arrows flew at the dad. He wore armor, standing with an army of vegetables ready to fight. He said this was enough. The man crossed his arms. In armor, he never expected his son to be this gifted in using mana at 4. He realized he was holding the boy back. The child had huge talent. Then a blast went off. The mother sent out energy, and her carrot army attacked. All this was happening at the dinner table. The parents were arguing. The mother said she wouldn't let her child leave home for a city that was hundreds of miles away. The father replied, "That's not just some city. He said his friend would make sure the boy was taken care of. The child sighed and kept eating quietly. His parents were still arguing. Then one of them hit the table. Both leaned over the child and looked at him seriously. The father said the boy should decide for himself if he wanted to go to the big city and train with a real teacher. The boy, with crumbs on his face, squinted. He didn't understand why they were letting him choose. It felt too big for someone who was just 4. He swallowed hard, set down his fork and spoon, looked at his parents, and said they should go together to meet the teacher. The father glanced at the mother with pride. She looked back, surprised. The child got nervous. He thought he had said something wrong or asked for too much. The girl touched her chin, thinking. Then both parents laughed. The boy said they had clearly never thought about going as a team. The mother leaned her head on her hand and said she'd feel more at peace if she could be there when he met the teacher. The brown-haired man hit the table so hard the plate bounced. He said they would all go together to the city of Cyrus. The boy was shocked. His parents were already talking about a 3-week trip. That night at home, the boy studied a book. He thought he had seen something like it before. He looked at every page closely. Then his mother walked in. She picked up the book and told him it was bedtime since they were leaving tomorrow. The boy started to lie down. He didn't understand why it was all happening so fast. The girl pulled the blanket over him and said she also hated to rush. As Arthur lay under the covers, he looked at his mom. She told him their old friends would help them get to the city too, since his father had once traveled with them. She kissed his forehead and left the room. As she walked out, she added that if she caught her son reading again, then she said he could take a few books for the trip. The room grew darker. The boy agreed and wished his mom good night. She said the same back. He knew the Horns twins had been around the area for a while. They even helped rebuild their house when they had time. The boy looked up at the ceiling and raised his hand. From what he'd heard, the group had 2 mages and 3 boosters. They would help with any trouble that came up. He was finally leaving this quiet little town. The boy thought it was time to see what the world was really like. Morning, forest. The family was walking along a nice long road. Someone up ahead was waving. A young man with red hair came up and hugged his father. The dad thanked him again for taking them on this trip. The brown-haired man motioned to the side and said, "Everyone, I want you to meet my son." He pointed at the child. "Arthur, introduce yourself." The boy bowed and said, "Hello, my name is Arthur Leywin." The red-haired guy smiled and patted Arthur's head. "Such good manners." His hair waved in the wind. The knife at his side looked scary. He knelt down and kept messing with the boy's hair. He asked, "Are you sure Ray is your dad, kid?" It was Adam. His power was augmentation, and he fought with a spear. Then suddenly someone grabbed Arthur's arms. It was a beautiful blonde woman. She picked him up and said, "He's too cute." She smiled. "Good thing you look like your mom." Her name was Angela Rose. She was a wind magic user. Arthur was pressed against her chest, thinking, "What's happening? I can't breathe." Someone grabbed him by the back of the shirt and lifted him up. "Angela, you're smothering him." He was lifted high. It scared him. The man was huge but had a kind face. It was Duran, a magician who used earth magic. He gently placed the child down and patted him on the shoulder. This big, kind man felt like a friendly dog. He raised a finger and smiled. The child suddenly looked to the side. A girl with sad eyes sat quietly. She had dark hair. It was Jasmine. Her magic was focused on double daggers. She looked down and walked to the wagon without a word. Another girl came to Arthur and said not to mind Jasmine. She just needed time to adjust. She held out her hand. A second brunette wearing a ribbon bowed to Arthur and said she was happy to meet him. Her name was Shard. She used a magic bow. Arthur's dad clapped his hands and said, "Now that we've met, let's get ready to move." They packed the carts. It wasn't easy, but everything got loaded. Someone asked if they were all set. Inside the cart sat a blonde woman and the child. They said they were ready. The 2 wagons, pulled by huge fast lizards, began to move. The young man looked ahead. They passed through stunning places. The journey begins. Night had fallen. The group was fighting monsters. Alice was cooking by the fire. Rai and Jasmine walked up, dragging huge wolves behind them. Everyone gathered around the fire. The boy leaned his head on his hand. A brunette walked over and asked how he was feeling, if he was tired. He started waving his arms and said he was tired. She smiled and said not to worry. It was his first trip in this life after all. She sat beside him and added that his father had bragged the whole way about his son being a genius magician. Then she asked, "Did you really awaken a year ago?" Adam had been watching them. He got up, stretched, and said he needed to warm up before bed. He reminded them that Arthur's dad was okay with training, then asked the boy if he wanted to play now. The kid frowned. He thought the uncle meant stretching on his own. Arthur's dad gave a thumbs up but said to be careful. They had just started moving again and hadn't done much mana training today. Then suddenly Adam grabbed the boy by the collar and picked him up. His parents looked at each other, watching their son being taken off to fight. Most kids his age were barely climbing stairs. But here, no one seemed to think fighting was strange. Arthur and the man stood face to face. The man grinned and asked if the boy was ready, swinging his sword around. The red-haired guy got into a stance too and asked if the boy knew how to power up his weapon. Suddenly, a giant tiger appeared behind him. The child flinched. He looked at his father in fear and sent a message in his mind. "He wants to fight for real. Get me out of this." But his dad just raised a fist, smiled, and sent a mental message back. "Make it count." The kid lowered his head. Useless, he thought. He closed his eyes, then snapped them open. He awakened his inner beast. The king appeared behind him. He gripped his sword tightly, gathering all his energy. Then he dashed forward at the man. The man just smiled and got into position. Arthur's sword came flying at him, but the guy used a trick with his blade. The boy was knocked aside and didn't understand what happened. He hit the ground, pushed off, and charged again, thinking, "This baby body is so annoying." Adam turned, surprised. He smiled again. Arthur's sword lit up. He swung and attacked. Adam struck back, but Arthur jumped up and slammed into him with his full weight, knocking him sideways. The man couldn't believe what just happened. While in the air, the boy swung again and locked eyes with him. The redhead tried to kick him, but Arthur dodged. He landed and stared in fear as the man rushed at him, waving his stick. A second later, bam, he struck. At that moment, the boy thought of Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The man's hit sent him flying. The boy dropped his sword. Arthur flew to the side and hit the ground hard. His mother gasped and screamed. Meanwhile, the man stood still, absorbing the counterforce from his last move. The poor kid was lying there, aching all over. He slowly got up. His elbows were scraped and bruised. Duran walked up behind the man and slapped him on the back of the head. "You hit him too hard!" The man rubbed the spot. "Who taught him to fight like that? What kind of hellish training made this little monster?" Arthur's dad just smirked and looked away. "I didn't teach him." His mother rushed to Arthur, kneeling down and treating his bruises. "Did your father teach you this?" The boy raised his hands and shook his head. "Number, I just watched Dad and read some books." Everyone blinked at him. Books? Then almost in sync, they asked him to teach them those moves. Arthur grinned. "It's simple. You just cross your back leg over the lead leg, kick off with mana, and let your body fall forward a bit. Then you..." Before he could finish, the brunette lost her balance and fell. The redhead launched himself into a tree, smacking it hard. Arthur paused. "Almost. You're almost there." The guy's head was literally lodged in the tree trunk. He stuck out a thumbs up. A few days passed. Their journey to the city of Cyrus continued. At a waterfall, Alice was washing Arthur while the others jumped off cliffs into the water. His birthday had passed. He glanced over as Jasmine approached him, holding a dagger. She handed it to him and said it was a birthday gift and a lesson. The redhead popped up from the water, flipping his hair. Everyone smiled. Training continued and everyone had made decent progress. Adam was watching when suddenly, splash! Duran was thrown off the cliff into the water below. Arthur thought about how the brunette had somehow mastered several techniques already. Back on the shore, the group was laughing, wrestling, and tickling each other. Arthur kept thinking, how did that girl understand his instructions so easily, especially something as tricky as the faint step? The sun was shining. The blonde was healing the brunette. Arthur's mom turned to him. "Get ready, we're leaving now." He was stuffing something into his bag, grinning. Okay, I'm hurrying." They set off again, walking past a strange gorge. Suddenly, the giant foot of a monster landed nearby, shaking the ground. Under the clear sky, they chatted casually. Someone joked, "I still remember how your dad always gets us into trouble." The redhead walked up to Arthur, smiling. Smiled, and everyone laughed. The brunette added that the redhead wasn't the only one causing chaos. She remembered a time they ended up in a strange place by accident. The girl turned to the guy, but he quickly cut her off, saying it wasn't true. It had just been a little rodent. She looked annoyed. Her son walked over and asked if Tiana was okay. She smiled softly and said she was just tired, that everything was fine. The boy placed a hand on her shoulder. He held a book in his other hand and went back to reading. But he was tense. Something was bothering him. He gripped the book tightly and looked away. Tiana's eyes widened. She glanced out through a gap and startled the boy, asking if he could teach her more. The boy looked ahead, then back at his book. Suddenly, everything shook. Fear filled him. Tiana turned quickly. "What was that?" The brunette shouted, "Bandits! Get ready to fight!" The blonde raised her dagger and commanded the wind to guard them. A strong gust formed, swirling around the cart. The mother shielded her son. Arrows flew. Like a wave of pressure, they came fast and hard, but the wind blocked them, sending some spinning off to the side. A young man looked around and spotted the brunette already ready to attack. Arthur's father moved into position. Duran gripped his staff. Adam stepped forward, an arrow stuck in his leg. Jasmine yanked it out without flinching. She leaped, slid to her knees, and aimed her weapon. Inside the cart, the mother and son stayed close, clearly afraid. Strange figures surrounded them. Some had boughs, others peeked from behind grass. Arthur spotted a man with scars across his chest. He planted his axe in the ground, smiling in a cruel way. "Jackpot," he said. Another man with big lips and a twisted grin added, "Leave the women and the kid. Keep them clean. Damaged ones are worth less." Arthur's mind raced. Had he been too sheltered? The cruel man stared at them, amused. Arthur clenched his jaw. "Damaged goods?" He grabbed his small sword. His face turned serious. Alice saw it and pulled him close, wrapping her arms around him to protect him. She was clearly scared, but whispered, "Don't worry, I'm here." At first, Arthur was stunned. Then he relaxed into her arms. But the arrows came again. One zipped straight toward the cart. The others shouted and rushed to protect them. They blocked what they could. Someone raised an earth wall. Still, arrows kept coming. Some aimed straight at the mother and child. The blonde fought back with air, but the bandits kept pressing. The brunette launched her own attacks from the wall, but the enemies defended well. Just then, Ray leapt from the cliff. He crashed into a bandit, sending stones flying. He took one down, then spun to strike more, moving like a bullet. In seconds, he crushed another, grabbed one by the head. A bandit raised a sword over him, but an arrow took the attacker down before he could swing. Ray turned and nodded at his rescuer. The brunette returned the nod. The fight wasn't over. She kept taking down bandits, and Ray stayed right behind her, doing the same. The redhead narrowed his eyes, furious, and looked ahead. He took down another thug, dust kicking up under his feet. Without stopping, he pointed his blade and drove it straight through a terrifying bandit. You could tell he was getting tired, but he kept going. At that same moment, the brunette struck down several enemies at once. Her attacks were fierce and unforgiving. Her eyes burned with rage. One of the bandits, covered in rings and holding a whip, lashed it forward. She dodged quickly, and the whip accidentally hit his own men. She landed calmly, as if nothing had happened. The man approached her again and told her to stop fighting. He sneered and said that soon she'd beg to stay with him. She glanced at him briefly before he struck again. She dodged fast, but he still managed to hit her face and hand. She stood facing him, hurt but steady. The boy, watching it all, realized she was in danger. He wanted to help. He looked at the card in his hand and wondered, could he even stand a chance against an adult in this body? Just then, something huge crashed into the cart, shattering it into pieces. It was his father. He looked exhausted. Blood ran from his mouth. The mother and son were terrified. The boy turned his head and saw the man who had hurt his father. His eyes went wide. He shouted at his mother to heal him quickly, but she turned to him with tears in her eyes. Something was wrong. "I can't," she said softly. The boy didn't understand. Why couldn't she heal him? While she did her best to tend to him, his father gave her a smile. "I'm okay," he said. "It's not fatal. Do what you have to do." The boy looked around, fear creeping in. His father called him over. "Listen," he said, serious now. "As soon as your mother starts the healing spell, they'll come for her. I can handle the leer, but I won't have time to protect you both. He told the boy to take his mother and run. Go back the way they came. Don't stop. The boy shook his head, scared. I'm not leaving you. I'll fight. You know I'm strong. His father smiled and placed a hand on his head. I know you are. That's why I'm trusting you. To protect your mom. Blood still trickled from his mouth as he added, It's not just her. The baby, too. The boy froze. He remembered his dad touching his mother's stomach. He remembered how she'd said she wasn't feeling well, that she was just tired. Now he understood. His mom was pregnant. His father leaned in. I was going to tell you when we reached the town, he said gently. The boy grabbed his dad's hand tightly. I'll protect her, he promised. He turned, standing firm as his mother kept healing. His father told him to be ready. There were 4 mages among the enemies. The bandit leader noticed what was happening. Furious, he pointed and shouted, They've got a healer! Don't let her escape! The boy didn't hesitate. He grabbed his mother's hand and said they had to run. She tried to resist, but he was firm. He looked ahead, determined. Dad isn't going to die. The redhead waved them on. Go, now! He clenched his teeth. A bandit tried to chase them, but Arthur's father blocked the way. Their weapons clashed hard. I'll hold him, he shouted. The mother and son ran, vanishing into the trees. One archer pulled back his bow and aimed at them. Arthur felt it. He turned, eyes wide. An arrow was flying right toward them. He turned just in time. An arrow was already flying at them, but the boy stepped in front and blocked it with his sword. He was furious. The blade cracked, then snapped in half, but it stopped the arrow. The bandit who fired didn't understand how, but before he could react, he was struck down. The brunette glanced over and shouted, Don't stop! They ran with their mother as fast as they could, but the boy felt something was wrong. Thinking about the bandits, he was sure there were 4 mages. He started counting. 1 being fought by the redhead. 2, his father was battling. 3, still unknown. But where was the 4th? Their leader was losing. Desperate, he screamed to forget the plan and just kill them all. The boy didn't know who he was yelling at until he turned his head. Someone was floating in the air. The 4th mage. Fear crept in. This was bad. The magician created a massive whirlpool of water and launched it at them. Arthur knew he could dodge, but his mother couldn't. He was angry now, furious. His whole body tensed. He stopped running. In his head, he quietly said sorry to his mom. Then he shoved her aside. She screamed his name, but he let the water hit him. He knew it might fail, but he had to try. He had to stop that mage. In that split second, he threw something into the whirlpool. The wave hit him, covering his body. Then suddenly, a blade shot out of the water and pierced the mage's knee. Attached to it was a thin, invisible thread of mana. He had created a connection. He reached for it. The string pulled him up. He flew toward the cliff, hands shaking, feet scraping the rock. He rose fast. The mage, injured, clung to the edge, but Arthur grabbed him, and they both fell. Duran, seeing it from afar, acted quickly. He formed a massive stone hand and sent it shooting down toward them. The boy was still falling, tears in his eyes. He thought about the others. He hoped they would be okay. He cried harder. In his heart, he just wanted to be a big brother. Light shifted, a room, curtains. The boy was sitting on a bed. He stood, walked to the door, and opened it. A girl stood there with a plate. He walked into the hall. Servants greeted him with polite smiles and, "Good morning, young lord." He said nothing. He walked down a large corridor and entered a quiet room. It was the office of the old man. The man looked up from his desk. The king was staring at a portrait. 3 figures, members of the council who actually ran the country, handling its politics and economy. Then the king turned to another portrait, his own. In a world dealing with low birth rates and few resources, wars had been replaced by duels. Armies were led by kings. He had been one of them. The old man asked, "Do you admire the portrait?" He stood from the desk and said, being on the council had its benefits, but he couldn't lie. He had always envied the glory and fame that came with victory. The boy walked up to him. "What could I possibly owe you?" he asked quietly. He pulled a medallion from around his neck and placed it on the table. Then he left the room. "I'm done," he said on his way out. He placed a hand on his forehead. He had spent his whole life chasing strength. For what? Fame? Glory? But he was still alone, an orphan, Everyone he loved was gone. He remembered the fire. He would give up everything he had now for one more moment around that fire, for one more night with his squad, for the laughter, for what he lost. Morning light began to spread across the sky. The boy was lying on the ground, barely aware of where he was. His eyes were narrow and unfocused. He didn't understand how he was still alive. Something was off to the side. He turned his head and saw the blood-covered body of a bandit, twisted and broken. He quickly looked away, feeling sick. Then he vomited, so loudly even the birds scattered. Now he lay there, covered not just in dirt and torn clothes, but also in green from the grass and leaves. He squinted hard against the light, and just then, a flower petal drifted down and landed on his face. He opened his eyes, brushed it off, and slowly lifted his hand. His body hurt everywhere. He rolled onto his stomach and, despite the pain, reached toward a berry nearby. It was hard, but he managed to grab it. He stared at it for a moment, then ate it quickly, almost desperately. He took a drink of water, tossing the flask aside when he finished, and kept staring up at the sky. Then he closed his eyes again, quietly thankful for the small meal. Birds chirped above him. Arthur opened his eyes again and tried to get up, but his strength failed. He collapsed, breathing heavily. He closed his eyes once more, barely able to remember anything. His small body lay still on the ground. Inside him, his manticore was black. But then, he moved. In a sudden burst of effort, he jumped up. The pain was sharp, but he managed to stand. Arthur looked to the side and noticed a dagger lodged in the back of the dead bandit. He pulled it out with so much force that he fell down again, landing on his backside. Looking up, he saw the massive cliff he had fallen from. It was incredibly high. He had no idea how he survived. He thought about how long he might have been unconscious. Then he stood once more, grabbing a stick for support. A huge forest stretched out all around him. It didn't matter. He had to keep moving. Just then, he heard a voice cheerfully say they were glad he'd woken up.